By virtue of Middle Platonism's sustained influence in Alexandria and the later presence of Neoplatonism, Western Christian thought at the start of the Middle Ages was overwhelmingly Platonic. And by Platonic here, I mean specifically Neoplatonic. And Augustine is a prime example of this. However, the pagan philosophical system cannot be absorbed completely into Christianity. So, from the Alexandrian school onward through medieval thought, the prevailing approach was to adapt Greek systems with significant modifications so that they could cohere with Christian theology as needed. At the same time, these philosophies offered substantial intellectual resources. The earliest example is how the Alexandrian thinkers used Middle Platonism to counter the dualism of the Gnostics, and their solution to the problem of evil that was involved in the Gnostic view of matter as evil. Platonism enabled them to say that by virtue of the forms which give order to nature, the material world is not evil. Christians could then insist that the problem is not matter and having a body, but something else. The same is true as we get to Augustine. Augustine of Hippo, born in 354, became enormously influential. He may be regarded as the first systematic thinker in the West whose work spanned the full range of philosophical and theological questions and whose impact endured. This is not to deny important Eastern fathers, such as the Cappadocian Fathers, like Georgi of Nyssa, who shaped Eastern Christianity with Platonic inflections, often in a more mystical way. But no doubt that Augustine stands out in the Western tradition in assimilating Neoplatonism into Christianity. Although his mother was Christian and his father apparently pagan, Augustine drifted in his youth toward Manichaean dualism. Manichaeism is a 4th century form of Gnosticism, which was explicitly dualistic: two eternal realms, the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. It drew on Zoroastrian elements while adopting a Christian veneer to it, so that when the kingdom of light sent a divine figure into the realm of darkness, the light was trapped and imprisoned in a body. After being executed, the body was revealed as unreal, and the captive light rose, triumphing over bodily evil. The practical consequence was that if the body is evil, salvation requires extreme asceticism and self denial to escape embodiment. Augustine found this account attractive until encounters with Manichaean teachers, which left him dissatisfied by their inability to answer his questions. He came to see two fatal problems. First, Manichaean dualism offered no plausible hope for the ultimate victory of good over evil if they are locked in an eternal conflict. Second, it reduced human beings to mere pawns in that cosmic struggle that ultimately they had nothing to do with, which is why he ultimately rejects Manichaean dualism. Augustine began to move beyond Manichaeism after exposure to Neoplatonism, though there were intermediate phases, including a period of attraction to skepticism of the academic school, like Carneades. But ultimately, through the influence of Ambrose, the Bishop of Milan, he was exposed to Neoplatonism, which provided a path leading to Christian theism, and ultimately to his conversion. So, what did he derive from Neoplatonism? All of this is spelled out in his book City of God, Book 8, where he praises Plato and Platonic thought. I highly recommend people read it, but in summary, his gains from Platonism include the conviction that God is not a material entity, as some Stoics believed, but an incorporeal spirit. Second, that God is the source of all being rather than only a portion of it. Third, that God is the highest good, as we can see this in the famous opening of the Confessions, which says, "Thou hast made us for thyself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they rest in thee," which expresses an inward teleology, whereby creation tends toward God as the source purpose of being. In the Neoplatonic line, evil is understood as privation or lack of good rather than an independently existing substance, as in Manichaeism. Evil is parasitic to good, it has no separate ontological standing. Augustine also accepts the soul immateriality. The soul, he argues, can discern truth from falsehood by dialectic reflection without relying on sense perception. It can span time through memory and traverse space by imagination, unlike the body because it is immaterial. Augustine echoes the Platonic idea of two loves: love for higher realities and love for lower things. In Neoplatonic narrative, immersion in desire for lower goods leads the soul into embodiment and bondage. Escape is achieved by the intellect's ascent toward higher realities. Augustine embraces the two love scheme, but will revise its salvific implications. From this emphasis, he fashions a Christian ethic centered on love. Love becomes the foundational meaning of moral law. He talks of not just the Ten Commandments the way the New Testament does, love is fulfilling of the law, but he talks of Greek virtues such as temperance, courage, wisdom, justice, and argues that love is the fulfilling of those, so that courage is loving God most and therefore braving all else well. Justice is honoring God and therefore ruling all else well. You see love finding expression on all the various virtues. Now to his disagreements with Neoplatonism. Well, with regards to the problem of evil, he's pretty explicit that at least the evil in us, the evil in the human soul, is not due to the way in which a body drags us in some deterministic fashion, but rather, he argues, the evil that we do is because of the free choice of will. And Augustine moves to a voluntaristic account of human behavior. And deliverance does not come through contemplating the higher good, but from freely choosing and loving the higher good. In other words, Augustine saw clearly that his disagreement with Platonism was because of the gospel, where the Christian gospel makes it plain that it is in a willing and full love for God that one finds deliverance. For Augustine, the intellect is not the one that saves us. Reason cannot overcome the passions because, in the final analysis, we are not ruled by what we know, we are ruled by what we love, and that is the crucial difference for Augustine. Now, that is not to separate knowing and loving. He does not separate them, but he does make a distinction that empowerment is in the loving, not in the knowing. Now, it is this, I think, which marks one of the major breaks between Greek thought and Christian thought. The second area of major difference is with the Neoplatonic notion of emanation, which is the outflowing from the one, which is the good, of all other things, such as that there is an inner determinism within the being of the one to emit from within its own being all of the infinite, such as the nous and the world soul, but also finite souls. It was emanation versus creation out of nothing. Augustine's objection to emanation is severalfold. He says, for instance, that if the theory of emanation is right, then when an animal is butchered, a part of God is being slaughtered. Personally, I don't think that it takes much imagination to see how Plotinus would respond to that. Plotinus' replies would stress that emanation are degraded by privation and not literal parts of the one. On the other hand, Augustine also objects to the notion of intermediary beings Middle Platonism adopts. There is two problems with this. First, in order for God to influence his creatures, he has to work through all these intermediary beings, which is not the Christian story that God acts directly. The second part is that involved in those intermediary beings and the theory of emanation is the fact that all of the intermediate beings are inferior to those above them in the hierarchy. So the nous is inferior to the one, which is God, and the world's soul is inferior to the nous, which is the Logos. So you have a hierarchy of increasingly inferior beings, but that does not fit the Christian understanding of the Trinity, which is trying to say not that the Son is of a similar substance, though inferior, but it says that the Son is of the same substance. The Son is co creator and eternal with the Father, thus sharing the same divine essence. He also emphasized that the Son's relationship to the Father does not imply inferiority, as both are co-substantial and united in their divine nature. So, how does he put all these pieces together? How does he Christianize Platonism? This is it for the first part of this topic. So, if you enjoy this discussion and want to see how Augustine kind of synthesized between Christianity and Platonism, please subscribe so you can see the future video that will discuss this. This is it for the video. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.